Hello, my name is Bree Hogue and I'm the sales manager of Powell's City of Books here in Portland, Oregon. Tonight we welcome John Brennan in conversation with Rob Reiner for Mr. Brennan's new book, Undaunted, My Fight Against America's Enemies at Home and Abroad. Mr. Brennan's memoir offers a rare and insightful look at the often obscured world of national security, the intelligence profession, and Washington's chaotic political environment. What emerges is a portrait of a man striving for integrity for himself, for the CIA, and for his country. Before I begin, I have a few housekeeping notes. This event is a ticketed event which included a copy of Undaunted. Your books will be mailed out today. After the conversation between our two panelists, we have time for questions. Please submit all of your questions for Mr. Brennan or Mr. Reiner using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And you can keep up with all of our events and other happenings at Powell's by following us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter, or visiting us at powells.com. Tonight, we're honored to welcome John Brennan. Mr. Brennan served as the director of the Central Intelligence Agency from March 2013 until January 2017. From January 2009 to March 2013, he was assistant to the President for Homeland Security and Counterterrorism. Mr. Brennan began his government service at the CIA, where he worked from 1980 to 2005, and specialized in Middle Eastern affairs and counterterrorism. Mr. Brennan currently is a distinguished fellow at the Center on National Security at Fordham Law School, a distinguished scholar at the University of Texas at Austin, a senior intelligence and national security analyst for NBC, and an advisor to a variety of private sector companies. Joining him tonight in conversation is Rob Reiner. Rob Reiner is an Emmy Award-winning actor and an acclaimed director. Reiner is also a dedicated political activist. In 1998, he passed a tobacco tax initiative in California to fund early childhood development. And for 7 years, he chaired California's first 5 commission to oversee the implementation of that initiative. In 2003, he led the effort to save Amundsen Ranch from an environmentally harmful development in the Santa Monica Mountains. In 2008, he and his wife, Michelle, helped form the American Foundation for Equal Rights, which filed a federal lawsuit to overturn California's Prop 8. The victory at the Supreme Court paved the way for marriage equality nationwide. Reiner continues to be an outspoken on social media and on news broadcasts, and he's outspoken on Twitter as well and through mini doc videos in fighting against Donald Trump's toxic presidency in order to protect our democracy. John Brennan and Rob Reiner, thank you so much for joining Powell's Books for this event tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. John, how are you? How are you doing?
Fine, thanks, Rob. It's great to see you. I'm sorry we haven't been able to interact personally because of COVID.
I know the last time we saw each other, we were having dinner, and now we have to see each other this way. When was the first time we met? I think it was in 2017, wasn't it?
Well, that's right. When Jim Clapper and I came out to California, and you were very nice to host a dinner for us and a discussion that we had out there with a number of your friends and our friends about what we were experiencing even back then in 2017, in the early days of the Trump presidency.
Yeah, and a lot has happened since then, obviously. I mean, this was before the Mueller report. It was before the report that came out of the Senate Intelligence Committee. A lot has happened since then. But I want to talk about your book because I had the greatest time reading it. I mean, I know you a little bit, but I got to know you a lot when I read the book. And what's great about it is not dry. I mean, you learn about the CIA, you learn about how it operates and how you function there and your career there, but it's also very personal and human. And that's what I love about it. And I think that's what you tried to bring to the CIA. I noticed in one chapter you talked about diversifying it and getting more women involved. And I love that about you, and I've loved that about you since I met you. You said something that that you were given an opportunity like you never could have imagined in your life. You talk about yourself as being this kid from New Jersey who all he ever wanted to do was meet Mickey Mantle or Roger Maris. And then you got to meet the great, the leaders of the free world and also heads of state around the world. So I want to know, what made you choose to go? Because you're a smart guy and you could have done a million things. What made you choose to become an intelligence agent?
Well, first of all, Rob, thanks so much for doing this. And I want to take my hat off to you for the political activism that Bree just mentioned over the course of many years. I think it's incumbent on all American citizens to get engaged. And I think you have demonstrated exactly how you can do that without working inside the government. Yeah, I grew up as a kid in New Jersey in a blue collar middle class family. And I didn't know what I wanted to do. As you said, I was sort of enthralled with being able to go over to Yankee Stadium with my father when I was young. But then as I got older, I set aside my early ambitions to become the first American Pope, which I talk about in the book. So then I didn't know what I was going to do. And so much of life, and you probably would agree with this, so much of life is the opportunities that present themselves as you go along. I was going to Fordham University in New York. I was a commuter student, and one of my professors brought in a brochure to study at the American University in Cairo. And I went over there, and it really opened my eyes about the big world that we live in. And also it made me understand more just how fortunate I was to be an American. My father was an immigrant from Ireland. He came to the States in 1948 when he was 28 years old. And he always impressed upon my brother, sister, and myself just how special it was to be an American citizen and never to take it for granted. So I think early on, given I had some exposure to the world with some travels, as well as my father's example, I wanted to do what I could to try to make this great country of ours bigger, better, greater, stronger, but also to fulfill what I think is its global responsibility. So early on, I didn't know what I was going to do. I had an interest in history. I would like to read about, famous American heroes and figures. But I was going to school on a bus one morning when I saw in the New York Times there was an ad for the CIA. And so I sent in my limited resume. They called me for interviews, and I was very lucky to be hired. And then after that, I just happened to be in the right place at the right time. One of the things I think I tried to work as hard as I could, because I knew that the world is full of a lot of smart people and people who were smarter than me, but I felt as though I needed to do everything possible to give back again to this country. And so it was fortuitous for me that I was given the opportunity by CIA, and then I had lots of opportunities throughout my government career.
Yeah, and what I get from reading your book is there is definitely an evolution to you. In other words, I see somebody who was raised, Catholic, who was, like you say, hope maybe I'm going to be the first American Pope. And then over time, you are exposed to the world. You see how different cultures live. You see how different people live. And the whole idea of wanting us all to make the world better for all of us, it changes your way of thinking about your fellow man and religion. And I see that evolution happening in you. You mentioned that, you're what is it? Something agnostic or something?
I'm a card-carrying, practicing agnostic, right?
Practicing agnostic. Yeah. So, but what it is you're drawn towards what we all want is this more perfect union, more perfect world. And the way in which the dreams of the United States and the extension of this wonderful, idea of democracy that we have not fulfilled yet, but we continue to try to do that. That is something that we would love everybody to have, that kind of freedom of expression and the freedom to be. And I noticed, and you open your book with this, and then you close your book with this. And I'm going to ask you a big question about this when you answer me. You were not allowed access to your files at the CIA in order for you to write this. And I want to first ask you why that was, and then I'm going to posit something for you to think about, and after you answer this.
Okay, well, previous CIA directors wrote their memoirs and wrote books about their lives and experiences. And every one of them that I know of requested access to their files when they were doing the research for their book. And all CIA directors retain their security clearances for the benefit of the government, so that their successors, if they had any questions about what they did or who they knew or giving them advice, it's very easy then for a former CIA director to go back into the agency and talk about, what their experiences were and provide that counsel and advice. Well, as people know, Donald Trump's White House announced in the summer of 2018 that because of my outspokenness and my criticisms of Donald Trump, that they were going to revoke my security clearances. Well, the truth is, and as I talk in the book, they never revoked those clearances because there was no legal basis to do so. And I do think that they thought I was going to file legal suit against them, and I'm sure I would have prevailed. But what Donald Trump did was to issue a directive, the first time a president has ever done something like this, issue a directive saying that the CIA and intelligence community were forbidden to share any classified information with me. And so therefore, CIA's hands were tied because a president of the United States told them, you cannot share that information. So when I asked for access to my files, CIA said that they couldn't do it. And they gave me heavily redacted copies of my daily schedule that took out anything that was remotely classified, such as any phone call I might have had with my foreign counterpart. The fact of that phone call was redacted, not the contents, just the fact of. So it was difficult to write this book, but I felt it made me even more determined to do so. Maybe picking up on the title, I remained undaunted.
Yes, that's what you say right at the end. You say you have stayed undaunted, and you've been outspoken. You've been outspoken and what you see as the truth, and I share your truth and what we see happening to this country. And listen, there are people, they hate me for what I say on Twitter, and I'm sure I've lost a lot of fans and so on. And I'm curious as to people who are really searching for the truth, really want to know what really is going on, what's happening, that there are forces out there, and you see that happening to anybody who wants one world, wants us all to be the brotherhood of man. A bad thing goes after them. And that's what I'm seeing happening to you. You're a good man, you're a decent man, you're a loving man, and you just want people to know the truth, know what's going on, and you get punished for that. And I'm just curious, do you connect anything with your evolution as a person and getting to where you are and seeing those kinds of things?
Absolutely. I talk in the book about when I went to Fordham, the classes that had the most impact on me really were my philosophy classes. When I would look back, especially the Greek philosophers, Socrates and Plato, and more than 2,000 years ago, people were really looking and trying to understand the meaning of life. And it made a great imprint on me. And so it made me, throughout the course of my life, try to figure out this world and what life is. And as you point out, no one has the answers. There's no right way, wrong way. There's a way to do good. And, the Greek philosophers would talk about virtue and, things like that are steeped in honesty and truthfulness. And that's why I think both of us have spoken out so vociferously against someone like a Donald Trump, because maybe I'm old school, but I always believe that those that are entrusted with leading a great country should have the integrity and honesty. And I served for six presidents, 3 Republicans and 3 Democrats. I'm not a Democrat or Republican. I'm affiliated with no political party. And although I disagreed with a number of the policies of those presidents, they all approached their work with tremendous seriousness of purpose and really understood the solemn responsibilities that go along with the office of the presidency. Donald Trump has shown none of that. The deceit, the lies, the willful misrepresentations of the truth, and the way he just has denigrated my old organization, the professions, the noble professions of Americans who are trying to keep this country safe. And it's all because of this self-love that he has, that now after being an intelligence officer for so many years and looking at authoritarian leaders around the world, I always found it rather strange that these authoritarian leaders could generate this type of cult-like following. I never in my wildest dreams thought we would see it here in the United States, but unfortunately, I refer to him as a snake oil salesman, and he unfortunately has been able to sell his elixir to the country, and it is just one lie after the other. And he looks at the world through this prism of what's going to benefit him personally, politically, financially, and he doesn't care about anybody else. He's missing the DNA empathy gene. And so I think you're right. I think everybody throughout their life, should be going through this evolution. Quite frankly, I abhor ideologues on either end of the political spectrum because I think they're blind to reality. I think life is, Socratic wisdom. The longer you live, I find the more I don't know. And the more I thirst for trying to understand the purpose and the meaning that we're all here. And again, I was very fortunate to be in the CIA, and again, a perfect organization and a perfect person. But it allowed me to have a much better appreciation of this very big world and just how special our country is supposed to be, because as you pointed out, founded in the preamble of our Constitution is in order to form a more perfect union. And we've been on this march for 244 years or so, and we still don't have it right, obviously.
Yeah, we don't have it right, but there are the precepts laid down in that Constitution to allow us to ultimately get it right if we don't have somebody that takes a wrecking ball to it, which I feel is where we are now. It feels like we're in two big existential threats. Democracy is being threatened, and the earth is being threatened through climate change. And in the case of Donald Trump, it feels to me like 4 more years of this, and both of those things will collapse. What are your thoughts?
I think I am a strong believer in American exceptionalism, not because we're better or smarter than anyone else. It's just that when you look at this great country of ours, just the size, the bountiful natural resources, long sea coasts, ports, arable land, navigable rivers, and the world's melting pot. And that exceptional good fortune, I think, makes it incumbent on us that we have recognized that we have exceptional responsibilities to the world. And I think since World War II, the United States, we've had our ups and downs, but we have been that leader of the free world. We have spoken out against the human rights atrocities that people experience. And so, unfortunately, Donald Trump has just totally squandered that U.S. standing. And I still stay in touch with a number of people from overseas, and unfortunately, they're shaking their heads like we are tonight, saying, "What happened to the United States? Is Donald Trump, the new America?" And I say, no, he is such an aberration. Yeah. He's not the new America.
This is the first time in my lifetime, and I'm a little older than you. I'm 73. America has been admired. It has been looked up to. It has been feared. It has never been pitied, and it's being pitied now. And that to me is like, what? We have all this wealth, all this intellectual, like you say, natural resources and intellectual resources, and yet it's just being squandered. And I feel like, you know your history, you know it better than I do. The sweet spot of any civilization is 250 to 300 years. And we are at 244, so there's no guarantee that this wonderful experiment of democracy is going to survive. And my fear is that 4 more years of this, and it may not.
Yeah. And so it's not just on the international stage that the U.S. has really receded from those responsibilities, but my foreign friends and colleagues say, look what you're doing to yourself. Look at what Donald Trump is doing as far as fueling this disunity, the polarization, fueling the rise of the far right, the militia groups and white supremacists and others. And they see that as just tearing us down. And they recognize that if we're tearing ourselves down, there's no way we're going to be able to fulfill that global leadership role. And Vladimir Putin and Xi Jinping are just watching us continue to erode in terms of our standing and our capabilities. And so you're right, 4 more years, these 4 years have been disastrous. And if he's given another 4 years, I don't know whether or not it's recoverable in our children's generation even.
Yeah. Well, you brought it up, and that when we met, like I say, the Mueller report was just being investigated. The involvement of the Russians was just being investigated. But what I've learned over the years is that Vladimir Putin, it has said now in reports we've read that he disrupted the election. He was trying to make, hurt Hillary Clinton and possibly help Donald Trump win. But his main goal is to just show democracy to be a failure and to disrupt democracy. And in that, so far, he has succeeded. We were polarized to begin with. Now we are more polarized than we've ever been. You have one channel on Fox News and Sinclair spewing a certain kind of information. Then you have mainstream media, NBC and CNN and so on, saying something else. And he's got to be sitting back and just, licking his chops.
Yeah, and the other autocrats around the globe are doing the same thing because they don't now face the pressure that they should and have under previous administrations. So you have the Erdogans of Turkey, you have the Dutertes of Philippines, you have the Mohammed bin Salmans of Saudi Arabia, who gets away with horrific murder and dismemberment of U.S. journalists, reporters, and this White House is silent in terms of those atrocities. And so, George W. Bush, and I disagree with his invasion of Iraq and other things, but he stood up and spoke out on behalf of the human rights, in Africa and other places. But Donald Trump sees no value in that. He looks at the world through this prism that really has a dollar sign on it. Yeah. In fact, George Stephanopoulos, I think, asked him about the Saudi relationship after the killing of Jamal Khashoggi and why he was continuing to go along basically without any impact. And his response, Donald Trump's response, was money. That's what he looks at. His whole life has been built upon that. And so he has no principles and no guiding light or North Star. And I think just like you, because I was a tremendous admirer of your father, who was just a great person, but also I think had that integrity and honesty. I feel as though my parents gave me the same thing. So a North Star that is really anchored in principles and goodness and integrity, if that's what you grew up in and you really just instill it in yourself, I think you look at the world in a different manner than a Donald Trump does. Donald Trump's only North Star is the dollar.
Yeah. And so because it's the dollar, I always, this is the question that you always, hear asked, which is, okay, so if he's only interested in himself, which we know he is, he's a narcissist, he's only interested in money because that's what his dad told him, just winners and losers and whoever has the most money wins. Then is he a witting or unwitting asset? In other words, it's not like he wants to take over the world. He just wants more money and to be thought of as a powerful guy. So it doesn't feel like he has grander designs on, world domination or any of those crazy things. So when Putin looks at a guy like this, or Kim Jong-un, or Duterte, or Erdogan, or whomever, are they looking at this guy as the useful idiot, or is he somebody who, is one of them?
Yeah. Well, whether he's witting or unwitting, he's certainly witless when it comes to dealing with these issues. And in the book, I obviously worked most closely with Barack Obama as a president for those entire 8 years of his presidency. And between Obama and Biden, these were two people that really brought that integrity and honesty to the office of the presidency and the vice presidency. And, they struggle with these issues, but worked very, very hard. But they had the character, and they also had the empathy as well as the understanding that they were in their positions not for their own benefit, but because they had a responsibility to the American people. And it's probably because there was such a precipitate, descent from the Obama presidency to someone like a Donald Trump that I think everybody is just, has been whipsawed. And unfortunately, I think the people around the world, the area that I worked on throughout my career, they are wondering whether or not, the word of the American president is only good for the time of their administration. When Donald Trump pulls out of the Iranian nuclear deal, when he pulls out of the Paris Climate Accords, as you say, something that is going to fundamentally affect the lives and livelihood of our children and grandchildren for years to come. And Donald Trump, on a whim, pulls out of things that the United States previously agreed to. what country is going to take our word for it in the future? And I'm hoping that when Joe Biden is inaugurated and becomes president, he's going to be able to reassure our allies and our partners that America is back. He's going to be able to send an unmistakable signal to the Vladimir Putins and others of the world that it's a new day in Washington, and you're not going to be able to get away with all of these things that you've been doing. And sends a signal just to the world community that the America that you knew is now back because Donald Trump really was an aberration, and hopefully, we're not going to see him again. You know, the fact that he was speaking at the White House today in another sort of political event, he just has abused, you know, the norms and standards. No other president would ever think about using that office for political purposes in a re-election.
It's illegal.
It is, absolutely.
It's just illegal.
But he has a corrupt attorney general who's not going to do anything about it.
No, he commits a crime a day. I mean, it's astounding. But I mean, you know, when you talk about Biden getting inaugurated, we all hope that happens. He's going to have a big cleanup job, clean up on aisle 5 there. I mean, because it's
5,
not
6, 7, 8, 9.
Yeah, exactly. Clean up on every aisle, because it's not just, you know, reconnecting with our allies around the world and our position in the world, but he's facing a pandemic, which has caused the worst economic crisis since the Depression. It's going to take longer, I think, than 4 years to get us back on track, you know.
Yeah. It's a domestic mess as well as an international mess. And thankfully, I think Joe Biden is already planning how he's going to address these problems. And he is somebody who's going to try to reach across the aisle. But I must say, Rob, you and I have lamented how the Republicans in Congress, you know, in the Senate and the House, have just totally abdicated their responsibilities. And I don't recognize the Republican Party any longer.
I don't think many people do. If you look at the Lincoln Project, or you look at the project that Bill Kristol has with the, you know, Republicans against Trump, they don't recognize the Republican Party. The Republican Party doesn't stand for anything anymore. It's just they've tied themselves to the mast of Donald Trump, and now the ship is sinking, and they have a hard time, you know, getting off the ship, and I think that they're going to pay a price.
Yeah. Well, you see, Lindsey Graham is in a really fight for his political life, and I'm so glad he is, because we see the 180 that he has done on the issue of a Supreme Court justice. In my book, I talk about an exchange I had with him back in 2010, I think it was.
Recount that, because it's an incredible story.
Yeah, well, I was going down to the Hill along with some other folks from the White House to try to ensure that we could get some support from the Senate to relax some of the stringent conditions they had on Guantanamo base. As you know, President Obama wanted to close that base, and he wanted to bring some of those individuals back to the States, try them, and send them off, you know, after convictions. We went down to see Lindsey Graham, and he was on the Senate floor, and we were watching the closed caption, the TVs that they have in the Senate offices about what the various members were saying. And Lindsey Graham was on the floor of the Senate railing against the Obama administration and criticizing me personally with this very misleading soliloquy. So then he comes out back to his office for our meeting, and he notices that we're watching the television, and he says, "Oh, I see that you saw what I said there." He goes, "Don't pay any attention to that. That's just politics." And that's Lindsey Graham. He doesn't care what he says. And any integrity
on the floor of the Senate. On the floor of the Senate, he's saying this.
And if he had any principles or integrity, unfortunately, it was buried with John McCain. Because when John McCain was around, I think he tried to keep Lindsey in check. Now that, unfortunately, John McCain is no longer with us, Lindsey Graham is just this craven chameleon that will change with the winds. And I'm so glad that his support for Donald Trump now is really redounding to his very strong detriment. And I hope Jamie Harrison gets elected.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think John McCain was his moral compass. And now he has, you know, now it's the compass is spinning around. He doesn't know what to do. I want to ask you about, because I met your lovely wife. She's a terrific woman, Kathy, and we had dinner. And I got to say, she's got to be like the all-time woman. I mean, because, you know, the life you've led, you've had 2 tours in Saudi Arabia, you've been all over the world, you drag her, and she, you know, it's got to be hard. I know it's tough for any military person or person who works for the government who has to go move around, but it has to have been tough on her and tough on you, and she hung in there with you. Plus, look at who she's with.
Well, just like I know it has been tough on Michelle over the years.
Yeah, well, no,
making sure that
anybody, it's hard for to live with me. My mother said this when she was 60 years. She was married 60 years, and they asked her what the secret to a 60-year marriage. She said, "Find someone who can stand you." Not somebody you can put up with, someone who can stand you.
Yeah, well, I have been very, very fortunate. We've been married for 42 years. She is a wonderful wife, mother, grandmother now. But I must say that, you know, she, in many respects, is the epitome of that spouse, women and men, who stand behind a lot of the public servants that are working on our behalf today: law enforcement, intelligence, diplomats, the military. Those that really make the sacrifices so that their loved one can carry out their responsibilities, which is another reason why Donald Trump has annoyed me so much, because I know here in the Washington, D.C. area, it's frequently tough for families to make do. And a lot of the spouses who keep the home fires burning while their CIA spouse goes off to Afghanistan or Iraq or has to go quickly on a trip, and they're not there for the PTA meetings or the birthday parties or for the ball games. And so they must be saying today, after Donald Trump's 3.5 years of denigrating and trampling these professions and dismissing the work and the sacrifices they make, he doesn't use intelligence. He doesn't believe in the law enforcement professionals. I'm sure the spouses are saying to them, "Honey, why are you doing this?"
Yeah.
For somebody who is so ungrateful, not just ungrateful, who is just so nasty about it. And so it's those who are behind the scenes that really give so much. And then also, how about the young students right now who were thinking about going into government and public service, and they look at a Donald Trump and they look at the dysfunction of Washington, and they say to themselves, do I want to get involved in it? Yeah. I talk to a lot of students. I'm affiliated with my alma maters, and I tell them, now is the time you have to, you know, give your talents to the government, because we need it more every day. And Donald Trump will soon be just he will be in the dustbin of history, as I said in one of my tweets. You know, he's going to be there. I have no doubt whatsoever that his legacy is going to be toxic. Yeah. And the name of Trump is going to be roundly condemned and denounced in the future. But I must say, his words really have resonated in a very, very negative and harmful way, beyond just, you know, the people that he affects around him. It is, again, the families, the spouses, those that sacrifice.
It's disgraceful. I mean, you have the story about what you did when you saw him standing in front of the memorial wall in Langley, and how he says these horrible things, and he calls, you know, people who serve in the military suckers and losers, and you know, he denigrates Gold Star families. He said they gave him COVID. I mean, it just, your head wants to explode when you see this guy. Anyway, I'm getting a little cue that we should open it up to questions. So why don't we do that? Oh, hi, how are you? You want to?
Hello, I'm back. Hi. All right. So if you have any questions for either of our panelists tonight, please submit them using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I have a question here. As a federal employee, it can often be difficult to maintain high morale in times when the politics of our, quote, boss doesn't comport with our personal views. For example, the recent executive order regarding diversity training is scapegoating. What advice could you give to help us keep our chin up in such difficult circumstances?
Yes, well, I think it is important for federal employees throughout the government to continue to carry out their very important and solemn responsibilities, irrespective of the political winds that are blowing and the political criticisms that might be directed toward them. Every month at CIA, I would administer the oath of office to a new class of CIA officers, and I warned them that they were going to be the meat in the political sandwich frequently, but they had a responsibility to ignore that, because the safety, security, and the prosperity of this country really depends on their being able to carry out their jobs. So I know that Donald Trump's tenure has been quite demoralizing, and a number of people have left government service. But our country is a great country, and it will regain its footing after Donald Trump. So I would just tell them to weather this storm throughout the course of one's life and career. You know, there are ups and downs. This clearly is very much of a down, but we will recover. And I believe that, you know, we're going to get on that path in another 100 days or so.
Yeah, and I think people should know that when John took his oath of office, he swore his oath of office on the Constitution. And the Constitution is our founding document that if you believe in what this country can be, and if you believe in that, you'll be okay. And that's like John says, regardless of what the political winds are.
Yeah, in the book I talk about that.
You did that. I love that you took your oath on the Constitution.
Yeah, and it was an original draft of the Constitution that George Washington, his personal edits were actually on that. So I had to get it from the National Archives. And I felt so proud to put my hand on that document and raise my right hand in giving the oath. But then my detractors said, aha, it was a draft of the Constitution. It didn't have the Bill of Rights. And so therefore, it was my way to signal that I wasn't going to adhere to those Bill of Rights. Oh, God.
Yeah, they'll find. And I mean, that's the partisan world we're living in now. So
yeah.
What else? Does anybody else have something?
This is a question from Mark. If the Democrats fail next month, what do you see in store for America?
Well, we kind of talked about that. I think that we're going to have a very hard time maintaining our democracy. I think it's going to be very, very difficult because he's already, gutted the Justice Department. He's gutted the State Department. He's got all the levers of government, and I really am frightened I just am frightened for the future of our democracy and democracy around the world.
I am frightened as well. I think the extent of the corruption is just unprecedented in modern history. And that's why I do think it's important, again, not speaking as a Democrat or a partisan, I just think it's important that Trump be ousted from office, that Joe Biden be inaugurated, and that the Senate flip. Because I think if Joe Biden is going to be able to accomplish what he needs to, both on the domestic and international front, it's critically important for him to have the support of both houses of Congress. But if that doesn't happen, if Donald Trump is reelected and the Republicans maintain the Senate, God knows what Donald Trump is capable of doing. And I really fear for our future.
Thank you. Let's see. You touched a little bit on the transition of power earlier. This question here is, what do you see as the responsibilities of the agencies to, sorry, my screen's flipping a little bit here. What do you see as the responsibilities of the agencies and the armed forces if he does dig in his heels and doesn't depart the White House?
Well, I frankly believe that it's going to be a resounding defeat for him and that he'll probably try to challenge it in the courts, but it will be so one-sided. Now, I don't want to give people any sense of comfort because I think everybody has to get out there and vote because anything can happen. But I'm hoping that there's going to be this one-sided vote. And so even the Republicans are going to see that there's not really a way for him to stay. And I do agree with Joe Biden. He will not be allowed to stay because by the Constitution, his powers of the presidency end on Inauguration Day. And will he go kicking and screaming? No, I believe that he may step down and let Mike Pence become president for a short while so that he gets a pardon for Mike Pence. There's no way that I can see Donald Trump standing at the inauguration of Joe Biden and doing what every president to this date has done, which is to acknowledge that there is this peaceful transition of power that is embedded in our democracy that needs to continue.
There's two questions sort of related to each other. One from Mark on if there's any way to pass a law to prevent another Donald Trump-like president. And I think that it's getting at a similar thing that Cindy is asking, is that are we supposed to just give up and accept that there are two Americas? So what happens? How do we prevent such divisiveness going forward from our leader?
Here's my feeling about it. I think, I mean, and this is going to take a lot of government reform, but we are a representative democracy. We're not a pure democracy. And we will always be a Republican in certain ways because you have representatives. But it seems to me that the national vote for who is the most powerful person in the government should be decided one person, one vote, which means getting rid of the Electoral College. And if that happens, I think it's very hard to see that there's no law you can pass that says, to protect yourself against another Donald Trump. But I believe in the wisdom of the people of this country. And if the majority of people in this country are getting to vote and they choose who the president is, I don't think we'll have another Donald Trump.
I'd like to agree with Rob. Maybe I'm not as confident. I do think there should be one person, one vote, which means that, the Electoral College is something of the past, but because Donald Trump did fall short of Hillary Clinton by nearly 3 million votes, significant. What I do think is important is for the American people to have a better understanding and appreciation of the candidates, because I really think that Donald Trump has misrepresented himself in his record greatly. And there needs to be, I think, some more objective way to evaluate somebody's experience, somebody's competence, somebody's temperament, maybe like the Good Housekeeping seal of approval or whatever, and give them grades or something. I had a root canal a couple of weeks ago, and there's a diploma on the dentist's wall that they went to dental school. Same thing that happens with a doctor or a lawyer. There are standards. There are no standards for someone to run for office. And that's part of our great democracy. I understand that. But yet Donald Trump has been able to take advantage, I think, of that environment. And so maybe there is a way to have, insist that tax returns be released before somebody runs for office. In the past, the primary systems and the political parties were the ones to try to really cull out those wackos. It didn't work this time.
Yeah.
The Republican Party did not do what it had to do, nor the primary system. So I think there probably are some ways to try to strengthen the system so that we don't have somebody who wouldn't qualify to be a dog catcher become president.
I'm going to ask you a little question on top of that, John, to piggyback on that, because you deal in the world of information, disinformation, and trying to figure out what is what. And you talk about it in the book about the advent of technology and cyber security and what we have now in social media. It's so easy to spread disinformation. I think that's going to be a big part of educating the public as to who's what, because you talked about, Benghazi. I mean, there was nothing there ultimately, but boy, did they play that forever. And you can take anything, whether it's QAnon or any kind of crazy wild conspiracy, and throw it out there and make it. And so I think it's up to social media platforms to basically say, this is not true. You can't keep putting that, because you deal with that, John. You know what that's like. And so don't you think that's a big part of keeping the people educated so they know what's right and what's
absolutely
not right?
Disinformation, that used to be the preserve of the Russians and foreigners, but now, quite frankly, you look at what Fox News is pushing out there, and you look at all these systems that are pushing out wrong information, untruthful information. As you point out, it gains traction then, and all of a sudden it becomes gospel and people believe it. All the things that people say about me, that I was a communist. No, I happened to vote. I exercised my vote in 1976 for the communist candidate. But there's this misinformation. This information is just inaccurate. Disinformation is the intentional propagation of false information. And Donald Trump does it every day. And unfortunately, his Republican quislings are doing the same thing. And so now I agree with you. Yeah.
And now he's doing it, and it's life and death. Disinformation about how to keep yourself safe in a pandemic. It's life and death.
And it's difficult for the average American citizen to figure out, so what is the truth? I'm hearing this from this network. I'm hearing that from that network. maybe there needs to be some type of more, a more objective, way of understanding what the truth is.
Yeah.
All right, we have a question here. How do you think our intelligence mission abroad has been impacted by this presidency? And what are the most serious challenges to our intelligent missions abroad?
Well, I think it has two impacts. One is that I think Donald Trump shows that he really does not care about keeping America's secret, because he has, said things and released things. And unfortunately, we have now a director of national intelligence, John Ratcliffe, who is just releasing things in a very politicized fashion. So what foreign citizen would be willing to work for the CIA and put their life at risk if they believe that, one, that the intelligence is not going to be used because the President of the United States and others don't really, appreciate it. And number two, they're going to treat it so cavalierly. And I must tell you, the CIA and the intelligence community rely heavily on our foreign partners, those intelligence services around the world. And I've seen some things come out that I know were from foreign services. And I think those foreign services now are much more reluctant to share information with us if this intelligence is going to be used for political purposes and be misused and abused and released.
How about, you have to only point to Helsinki to know what this man has done to our intelligence collection and all of our intelligence agencies. He sided with Vladimir Putin over our own intelligence agencies. That, to me, that had to be the biggest blow to everybody in your community, no, John?
Yes, and what concerned me most was when Donald Trump insisted on sitting down with Vladimir Putin and not have his national security advisor there or a secretary of state. What did Putin and Trump talk about? And then Trump was a translator, an American translator, and he took those notes from the translator. So that's why when I briefed Trump in Trump Tower in early January of 2017, I was very, very concerned that anything I told him he might use in order to protect himself from being exposed for what he has done in the past.
Okay. This next question has been upvoted a couple times, so I'm gonna ask this. How can we prevent a political seesaw? A Democratic president accomplishes something, then a GOP admin comes in and undoes everything. This is getting back to your question about countries trusting us again.
Well, it's a good question. As I said, is the word of the United States only good as long as a certain administration or certain political party is in power? That sends a very disturbing signal, I think, to the world. And as we pull out of these different multilateral organizations, and we are ceding a lot of this ground to the Russians and the Chinese because they play in these organizations. The fact that we're not really more seriously engaged in the UN and using our influence in a very sort of positive way, I think is appalling. And so I think, as Rob pointed out, Joe Biden is going to have his work cut out for him, because I think the countries around the world are concerned that, are they going to get whipsawed now just because there's a new sheriff in Washington? Does that mean that we're just going to go back to the old way? And what happens if in the next election there is a Republican elected? And so the greater stability we can have and consistency, that doesn't mean we shouldn't be evolving our views and positions, because I think that is just the natural thing to do. But the fact that there are these abrupt changes, again, the US tearing up its agreement with a Security Council agreement, for example, on the, again, Iranian nuclear deal, that just sends a very chilling signal to everybody. And why should a Kim Jong-un of North Korea, reach some type of agreement with the United States when he knows that next administration may just tear it up? So not only did it undercut what we were trying to accomplish in terms of steering Iran away from the nuclear program, but it really did, I think, undermine the chance for the United States to reach some of these agreements and deals in the future.
I think that the bulwark against that seesaw thing that you talk about is to make sure that you elect a person who's not a liar. You don't have to agree with their political views. You want to, obviously, but if there's nobody who's lying, because when you pull out of the Paris Accord or you pull out of the Iranian deal, basically what you're saying is the United States is a liar. And if the guy who's inhabiting the Oval Office is a liar, then that's going to be projected throughout the world. So we just have to make sure we may not agree with somebody's policies, but we don't want a liar in the White House. And I think that is the one way you can ensure that America's word is good.
We have time for just 3 more questions, and I have one that's a bit lighthearted since the rest of them aren't quite as lighthearted. This person would like to know how Mr. Reiner and Mr. Brennan met and became good friends. They seem like 2 very different people.
Well, we met, I was right after the election. I had been reading all this stuff about the Russian involvement in the election and what they had done. And I didn't really, I didn't know how far it went. I knew there were certain contacts that were made, but I didn't know how far. So I started reaching out to people because I put together a website with my wife called the Committee to Investigate Russia. And I just wanted to try to understand what had happened. What had they done? What was the impact of the disinformation campaign that they had and the hacking of the DNC and John Podesta and so on. So I started reaching out to John and Jim Clapper and Michael Hayden and John Cipher and Michael Morell and just said, I want to put together a group of people so that we can try to understand this a little better. And I guess that was back in 2017. I guess you had just left the agency.
Yeah, it was the spring of 2017. And so Jim Clapper and I flew out and met with Rob the first time. We had talked on the phone a couple of times. And then we also did a video with you when you came here to Washington, as you were running some of these efforts to try to ensure that the Russians weren't going to do this again and not give Donald Trump a pass. But it may seem like we're very different. Obviously, we've had different types of careers. I think from the standpoint of our views, our political views, and the emphasis that we place on the North Star and integrity, and that sometimes maybe I come across as this CIA guy that's all that straight. I must tell you that in my book Undaunted, I acknowledge some things that my children found surprising about me. I did have an earring when I was younger. I smoked some hash, and then I had a motorcycle, and
you inhaled, didn't you?
And I inhaled. I acknowledged. I admitted I inhaled. So yeah, but so I think we're very much kindred spirits in many areas, and so that's why I really have enjoyed being affiliated with Rob and just having. I like to think that we can each call each other friends.
We are friends, and to me, it's the greatest because I live in a certain world out here in California with showbiz, and I look to see certain people that I see, in government that I can respect, and I can say, oh, that person has integrity. And again, you don't have to agree with everything. You just have to see that's a non-liar. That's a person who's gonna at least try his hardest to tell the truth. And that's what attracted me to John. And he's opened my eyes up to a lot of things, and the people I've met through him, it's been great. And I just feel bad that I can't see you in person. That's my bad feel. I wish we could have dinner or something.
Well, we also both unleash on Twitter now and again if people haven't noticed.
We do that.
This question is, what do you think is Putin's fate? Does he have another 20 years?
I have a take on Putin, and I'm going to hear what you think, because I'm working on a project that is about Trump and Putin and their intersection and whatever. I think that Putin, he comes from a hard scrabble upbringing, and his father had, he lost a lot of people in the, there were 500,000 people that died in the siege of Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg, and he always thought of wanting to see Mother Russia succeed. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union, I think he had this idea that he wanted to put Russia back to a place of prominence in the world. And I think that he's worked very hard at that. And I think he's trying to figure out a way to get out of this at this point. He may not, he gets reelected, but he wants to get out of it in a graceful way. If he can elevate Russia and diminish democracy and leave with that kind of high, I think he would probably like to get out. But it's hard to get out when you're the head of an authoritarian state. They don't let you out so easy. And if you've done a bad thing, bad things can happen to you. So that's my take on it. I'd love to hear what you say, John, because I'm sure it's smarter than me.
No, Rob, I agree with you, and that's why I think that he has been so supportive of Donald Trump, because Trump has helped facilitate that trajectory for him. He's been giving Putin a pass, and he's making Putin, in the eyes of many, more legitimate. And so that's why I think he's doing everything possible to get Trump reelected, because I think it's inevitable in my mind that he's going to have to relinquish political power, but he's trying to maintain that power behind the scene. And if you have people like Trump and people of that ilk in the White House, it enables him to do that. But his view is, yes, Mother Russia really should be a superpower, and he sees the U.S.-Russia relationship in a zero-sum game. So anything that hurts the United States, in his mind, really helps Russia, because it tends to try to better, equalize that relationship. Yes, they're a nuclear power, but they don't have the economy. They don't have that political influence of the United States. And so I think, as Rob said, he's trying to figure out what's the next chapter of his life, his career, that he's going to be able to preserve the wealth that he has amassed, and not just be the subject of recriminations on the part of, I think, the Russian people.
Yeah, and if the world moves the way it's supposed to move, which is away from fossil fuel energy, I mean, his entire economy is based on oil and gas. So in order for him to grow his economy, he's going to need sanctions lifted from the United States. He's going to have to find ways to.
I think maybe we lost Rob there.
I can't hear him.
Okay. I'll go ahead to the last question, and hopefully Mr. Reiner can rejoin us.
Okay.
This question is asked by a few people. Other than voting, what can Americans who don't work in the government do to help preserve our democracy?
Well, I've been a long advocate of public service, and there are many different forms and types of public service. You can work for the government, but you can also do things in your local community. And so I think every American has the opportunity to serve their fellow citizens in one way or the other. But staying engaged and really trying to understand, the truth. One of the things that I do is I try to go back and forth listening to different networks, the ones on the left and the ones on the right. I want to hear what my fellow Americans are listening to and hearing. But I do think it's important to be as informed and as educated as possible, and try to put yourself in the shoes of some others. We all don't have the same views and perspectives on life or these policy issues. And there are some very controversial issues here in the United States that are dividing us. But that's one of the things that I really admire about Joe Biden. He has long said that he's somebody who reaches across the aisle. So I think the average American, again, trying to stay informed, be as educated as possible on issues, both domestically and internationally, try to discern the truth as opposed to just listening to the ideologues, and doing what you can to try to make this country a better country, and as Rob was pointing out, a more perfect union. I think we're all in this together, and especially for people of my age, I'm trying to do what I can to ensure that my children and grandchildren are going to be able to enjoy the same safety, security, prosperity, and well-being that I have been most fortunate to enjoy during my lifetime. So it's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, just to give the readers a better sense of some of these national security issues. Yes, it is from my perspective, but I hope it allows them to understand a little bit how challenging and difficult these roles are and these issues are. And again, nobody has the monopoly on truth.
Thank you for that. And thank you for taking our questions tonight and speaking with us. It was a real pleasure to welcome John O. Brennan and Rob Reiner tonight. On behalf of Powell's Books, I want to thank everyone for joining us. Mr. Brennan's new book is Undaunted, My Fight Against America's Enemies at Home and Abroad. Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you, Bree. And thank you, Rob, wherever you are.
Yes, thanks, Rob.